The announcement echoed through the crowded terminal. Flight 726 to New York, final boarding call. The airport was buzzing with the usual chaos, suitcases rolling, children crying, businesspeople speaking into phones as though the world would collapse if they hung up. In the middle of it all stood Elena Carter, a 26-year-old woman with a heart too big for her own good and a wallet far too thin for the life she dreamed of. She clutched her boarding pass, a one-way ticket she had saved for months to buy. It wasn't just a flight, it was her chance at a new beginning. Her tiny hometown had offered nothing but sorrow after her mother passed, leaving Elena with debt, endless double shifts at the diner, and the aching sense that she was stuck in a life going nowhere. This ticket was freedom. It was her doorway to a city where dreams might actually take shape. But destiny, it seemed, had other plans. As Elena waited in line to board, she noticed a man struggling a few places ahead. He looked exhausted. His clothes weren't fancy, just simple jeans and a hoodie, but there was something quietly commanding about him. He had sharp features hidden beneath unshaven stubble, and dark circles under his eyes told the story of sleepless nights. Beside him stood a little girl, maybe 5 years old, clutching a stuffed rabbit so tightly it looked ready to burst. She tugged on his hand, whispering, "Daddy, I'm sleepy." The man bent down, his voice low and gentle. "Just a little longer, sweetheart. Almost there." But when the attendant scanned his ticket, her face hardened. "I'm sorry, sir. There's been a system error. Your ticket is no longer valid for this flight. You'll need to wait for the next available one." The man blinked in disbelief. "What? No, there must be a mistake. Please, I've been traveling for 2 days straight with my daughter. She hasn't slept properly." The attendant shook her head. "I'm sorry. This flight is overbooked. You'll have to wait." The little girl's lip trembled. "Daddy, I'm tired." The father's jaw tightened, frustration flashing in his eyes, but he pulled her close, whispering something soothing. Still, Elena could see it, the man was at his breaking point. Her heart clenched. She thought about her own father, who had once carried her home from school after she fell asleep on the bus. He was gone now, but that memory, it still burned warm inside her. And without thinking, she stepped forward. "Excuse me," Elena said softly, holding out her ticket to the attendant. "You can give them mine." The attendant blinked. "Miss, are you sure? This is a non-refundable ticket." Elena's throat tightened. She knew what this meant. Months of saving, gone in a heartbeat. Her dream of leaving, postponed indefinitely. But when she looked at the little girl, eyes heavy with sleep, and the father's desperate expression, her choice became clear. "Yes," she whispered, forcing a smile. "They need it more than I do." The man turned sharply toward her. No, I can't accept that. You don't even know us." Elena smiled faintly. "You don't have to. Sometimes strangers help each other. That's just life, isn't it?" His eyes softened, a storm of emotions flickering there. Gratitude, pain, confusion. "But, go," she urged gently, placing the ticket in his hand. "Before you miss it." The man swallowed hard, as though words had abandoned him. His daughter blinked up at Elena with innocent wonder. "Thank you, lady," the little girl whispered, her voice laced with sleep. Elena's chest ached as she watched them walk through the gate. The father glanced back one last time, his gaze locking with hers. There was something there, something unspoken, almost like a promise. And then they were gone. Elena sank onto a bench as the plane roared to life. The tears she had been holding back stung her eyes. What had she done? She had nothing waiting for her at home. The ticket had been everything. But then, she thought about that little girl, safe in her father's arms, finally getting some rest. A soft smile tugged at her lips. Maybe kindness is its own kind of ticket. Still, a small voice inside whispered, "But what about you, Elena? Who's going to save you?" Hours later, after the terminal emptied, Elena dragged her small suitcase toward the bus station. The night air was cold, and loneliness pressed heavily against her ribs. She didn't know that somewhere above the clouds, in first class of that very flight, the man sat wide awake, staring out the window with his daughter asleep on his chest. His name wasn't just Daddy. It was Alexander Graves, CEO of one of the largest tech companies in America. A man whose face had graced Forbes magazine, whose wealth could buy 100 planes outright. But tonight, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a father in disguise, running from a world that demanded too much of him, trying desperately to protect the only family he had left. And he couldn't stop thinking about the stranger who gave up her dream for him. The plane touched down hours later, but Alexander Graves barely noticed the smooth landing. His daughter, well, not his daughter exactly, but his late sister's child, little Amelia, slept soundly against his chest, her small breath steady at last. For the first time in 2 days, peace washed over him. Yet in that same peace, guilt burned. He kept seeing her face, the young woman at the gate, handing him her ticket with trembling hands but steady eyes. There had been no hesitation, no calculation in her kindness. She had simply seen a father and child in need and sacrificed everything she had planned for herself. Who does that anymore? He wondered. Most people he knew in his world of wealth and boardrooms would have walked past without a second glance. To them, money solved everything. But she had nothing to give but her chance, and she gave it freely. He wanted to know her name. To thank her. But she was gone. Alexander shifted Amelia gently, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. The little girl had been through enough, losing her mother, being raised by a man who was both her uncle and reluctant guardian, and now enduring his desperate attempt to keep her away from a custody battle brewing in the shadows. The board of his company didn't know the full truth. Neither did the press. All they saw was the ruthless CEO, cold, ambitious, untouchable. They didn't know he had stepped into the role of parent, fighting behind closed doors to keep Amelia with him instead of being sent to strangers who only wanted access to her inheritance. He had disguised himself these past few days, ditching the tailored suits for hoodies, traveling under a quiet alias. He thought no one would notice him. And yet, she had noticed, not who he was, but that he was a man on the edge, a child in need of comfort. Her kindness rattled him more than any boardroom defeat ever could. Back in the city, life resumed with its usual ruthless rhythm. Meetings, calls, legal documents. But Elena Carter's face would not leave his mind. On the third night after his return, Alexander found himself sitting alone in his penthouse office, Amelia asleep in the guest room, the city lights sprawling endlessly below. His assistant, Matthew, entered with a stack of files. "You're distracted," Matthew said simply. He'd worked for Alexander long enough to see through his armor. Alexander smirked faintly. "I'm always distracted. That's what running an empire does." "No," Matthew pressed. "This is different. What happened on your trip?" Alexander leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I met someone. Or rather, someone I'll never see again. She gave up her plane ticket for me and Amelia." No hesitation. Matthew raised a brow. "That's rare." "It's more than rare," Alexander muttered, his eyes distant. "She reminded me there are still people in this world who act out of kindness, not self-interest." "Then find her," Matthew said simply. Alexander chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "How? She's just a stranger in an airport. I don't even know her name." But even as he said it, a strange determination stirred inside him. CEOs didn't sit back and wait for fate. They chased what they wanted. And he needed, to find her. Meanwhile, across the city, Alina's life had returned to its weary rhythm. Back at the small diner where she waitressed, the neon lights flickered overhead as she poured endless cups of coffee for grumpy truck drivers and tired office workers. Her coworkers teased her for being soft-hearted. "You gave up your ticket for some random guy." Her friend Marissa exclaimed. "Girl, you're too good for this world." Elena just smiled weakly, though inside, her chest ached. It felt like the right thing to do. But at night, when she lay in her tiny rented room above the diner, she couldn't stop thinking about the man and his little girl. His eyes had been full of exhaustion, yes, but also something deeper. Something broken. She had no idea he was sleeping in a penthouse that kissed the sky while she huddled under a thin blanket, whispering prayers for a better tomorrow. Weeks passed. One evening, Elena stayed late at the diner, cleaning tables after closing. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up, frowning. They were closed. A man walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence commanding even in casual clothes. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, but there was no mistaking the sharpness of his features. Her breath caught. It was him, the father from the airport. He stopped when he saw her, as though he hadn't quite believed he'd find her either. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then he stepped closer, removing the cap. It's you. Elena blinked, her heart pounding. You found me. His lips curved into a faint, almost disbelieving smile. I had to. You gave up your ticket, your chance, without even knowing my name. I couldn't just forget you. She shook her head, trying to process. But how did you? He didn't answer that. Not yet. Instead, he said softly, my name is Alexander. And I owe you more than I can ever repay. Elena laughed nervously, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would do. His gaze darkened with intensity. No, not anyone. Hardly anyone. Something in his voice made her shiver. And for the first time, Elena began to sense that the man standing before her was far more than he appeared to be. Elena stared at him, her mind racing. The last person she expected to walk through the door of her dingy diner was the same man whose ticket she had surrendered weeks ago. Alexander's presence filled the room in a way that unsettled her. He wasn't just another weary traveler anymore. There was a quiet authority in his stance, a gravity that made her pulse quicken. What are you doing here? She whispered. I told you, he said gently. I couldn't forget you. You gave up something precious for me and Amelia. I needed to thank you. Her brow furrowed. Amelia, your daughter. A shadow flickered across his face, softening his sharp features. She's my niece. My sister passed away last year. I've been raising her since then. She means the world to me. Something in his voice broke Elena's heart. A tenderness wrapped in grief, a man carrying far more than anyone could see. She found herself stepping closer. You love her deeply. I'd give up everything I have to keep her safe, Alexander admitted, his voice low. Elena smiled faintly. That's exactly why I gave you my ticket. I saw that love in your eyes. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. His gaze lingered on her, searching, almost as if he was seeing someone he didn't realize he'd been waiting for all along. Over the next few weeks, Alexander returned to the diner more often. Sometimes with Amelia, sometimes alone. To the other waitresses, he was just a polite customer who tipped generously. But Elena sensed there was more to him, something carefully hidden beneath the surface. He asked her questions no one else did. About her life, her dreams, the mother she had lost. He listened when she spoke, really listened, as though her words mattered. And Elena, who had spent years being invisible, felt seen for the first time in forever. But one night, after closing, she found him waiting outside the diner in a sleek black car, Amelia asleep in the backseat. He leaned against the car door, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. Elena, he said softly. There's something I need to tell you. They drove through the city, the lights blurring past. Finally, Alexander pulled into a quiet overlook where the skyline shimmered like a sea of diamonds. I haven't been completely honest with you, he began. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. I told you my name is Alexander. That much is true. But what I didn't tell you is, I'm Alexander Graves. Elena frowned. The name was familiar. Too familiar. Her eyes widened in shock. You mean, the Alexander Graves? The CEO. He nodded, his jaw tense. For a moment, Elena couldn't breathe. The man who sat across from her wasn't just some weary father. He was one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in the country. His face had been on magazines, his name whispered in financial headlines. And yet, he had been the man at the gate, desperate, exhausted, clinging to a child who meant everything to him. Elena shook her head, laughing bitterly. So this was just some experiment. The billionaire pretending to be normal. No. His voice cut through the night, raw and desperate. He turned toward her, his eyes fierce. Elena, I never pretended with you. That day at the airport, I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't powerful. I was just a man trying to get his little girl home. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him. But doubt clawed at her. Why me, Alexander? Out of everyone in your world, people with money, power, status, why come back for me? I'm nobody. He reached for her hand, his touch warm, grounding. You're not nobody. You're the only person who's ever looked at me and seen more than money, more than power. You saw a tired man and a little girl in need. And you gave us everything. Tears stung her eyes. I didn't even think. I just couldn't let that little girl suffer. That's why you're different, he whispered. That's why I can't let you go. In the weeks that followed, their worlds collided. Alexander began weaving Elena into his life, not with flashy gifts or grand gestures, but with quiet moments. Introducing her to Amelia, who adored her instantly. Sharing late-night talks where he shed the armor of CEO and spoke like a man starved for understanding. Elena, in turn, found herself drawn deeper into his orbit. She saw past the headlines, past the wealth, and into the soul of a man carrying burdens too heavy for one person alone. And somewhere between shared coffees, stolen smiles, and Amelia's innocent laughter, Elena realized she was falling in love. But love was never simple. Word spread quickly in Alexander's world. The ruthless CEO scene with a waitress from a downtown diner. The tabloids swirled with rumors, the board of his company frowned in disapproval, and whispers filled the corridors of power. One evening, Alexander stood before his board of directors, their expressions sharp with judgment. "She's not suitable," one man sneered. "This girl could ruin your image." Alexander's voice was steady, unyielding. "My image doesn't matter. My integrity does. And Elena Carter is the only person who ever reminded me what that means." But back at her apartment, Elena struggled. She wasn't blind. She saw the headlines, the way people looked at her like she didn't belong. She told herself it couldn't last. That people like her didn't end up with men like him. And yet, when Alexander showed up at her door one night in the rain, Amelia clinging to his hand, all her doubts melted. "Elena," he whispered, rain dripping from his hair, his eyes burning with urgency. "I don't care what they say. I don't care about wealth, power, or the empire I built. I care about you. I care about us. And if you'll let me, I want you by my side. Always." Elena's breath caught, her heart trembling. She looked down at Amelia, whose small voice broke the silence. "Please, Elena, stay with us." Her tears spilled freely then. All the loneliness, all the years of sacrifice, all the dreams she thought she'd lost, they had led her here, to this moment. She stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Yes, Alexander. I'll stay." The months that followed were not without challenges. But together, they faced them, her strength balancing his vulnerability, his love healing the wounds she carried. And one sunny afternoon, in a garden filled with Amelia's laughter, Alexander knelt before Elena with a ring that glittered like the city skyline. "I may have a fortune," he whispered, his voice unsteady, "but you are my greatest treasure. Will you marry me?" Her smile was radiant through tears. "Yes." And as Amelia clapped her hands, shouting with joy, Elena realized that sometimes, the dreams we lose lead us to something far greater, something we never even knew we were searching for. Love, family, home,